the Reserve Bank of South Africa will be making a rate decision later today, and one of their main things that they're going to be looking at, of course, is inflation, which, as at the last count for August, was 4.8%. That's the headline number for inflation in South Africa. So, how do employers, they're moving now to businesses, how do employers around the world cope with inflation, and how do they, as far as coping with it for their employees, for the sake of the employees, how do they maneuver? Joining us now to discuss further, Vumile Msweli, award-winning career consultant, CEO of Hesed Consulting. Vumile, thank you so much for joining us. Good morning to you, I think, or is it good afternoon in Johannesburg? So how can we effectively support our employees during inflationary challenges to ensure their financial well-being?
Good afternoon, Arotis, from a beautiful springtime here in Johannesburg, South Africa. As you mentioned, yes, we're expecting our inflation to hopefully stay the same, but we will hear from Lesetja, our governor, this afternoon. With that said, I think the key focus for most employers is how do they start diversifying their revenue across the globe so they're not stuck with just the financial impact in South Africa when it does come to inflation and supporting their employees. We're seeing a number of trends coming through in the country at the moment. There's been an increase in people diversifying their workforce, looking for labor that's a little bit more affordable across the globe in places such as the rest of the continent, as well as Asia, specifically an increase in the Philippines. And of course, we're also trying to diversify our revenue by saying, are we now tapping into other markets such as the US, which of course has been a little bit tricky with what's happened with BRICS here in South Africa, and also starting to say, how do we help our employers receive revenue just not from us as employers, but also from other sources across the globe, as opposed to just relying on us. Things have been very, very difficult here in South Africa, with an unprecedented increase in repossessions of homes as well as cars.
Wow. So what about practical strategies then that can be employed to optimize employee benefits?
So the first piece there for us is going to be, how do we sure that we're conducting a comprehensive compensation analysis, not just locally, but also regionally as well as across the continent. Are our employees currently competitively paid? If they're not, what can we do that is not just financial remuneration, that we can support them? So making sure that they're able to adjust to a cost of living. We're doing this by we're seeing an increase in employee wellness programs, specifically around financial coaching. Also ensuring that we're doing master classes, which has become a big trend, with financial experts to help people stretch their rands more than they did previously. We also see an increase in offering flexible work arrangements, more so than ever. People are working from home, specifically with the anticipated fuel hike coming up again in October. We're also saying, how can we expand non-monetary benefits? Of course, we are looking at potentially collaborating from a wellness perspective to say, as opposed to just getting pure salary, can we also perhaps offer you discounted food stamps and food discounts with some of our suppliers, etc. So we're starting to look at almost a bartering system as opposed to a pure remuneration via cash, which has always been the norm, and a great increase in communicating regularly and educating our employees.
Okay, speaking of educating, what about upskilling? What areas, considering the current economic climate, what kind of areas of upskilling can be beneficial to employees during this high inflationary environment?
So in this environment, I think it's critical that employers are looking at things like, are our current employees competitive globally? So where we can, start leveraging existing online courses, existing training that's probably been recorded before, as opposed to now taking out and forking out more money for learning and development. We are seeing an increase in spend when it comes to training and education around potential tax benefits such as learnerships. So those are the trends where employers are really trying to make sure they're getting more bang for their buck whilst keeping that cost at a minimum.
Now, as far as the role of continuous professional development, can you speak to how important that is for employees?
Employees need to make sure that they're no longer waiting for the employers to ensure continuous professional development, but that onus is on them. And the reason for this is if you are aware of the trends, if you are aware of what the latest skill set that are required in your particular industry is, and you are able to meet those yourself, you're able to add more value to the employer. So when we are looking at restructuring and potentially cutting down costs, you are top of mind because you are adding more value. This is a little bit of a shift from the South African employee audience who is currently accustomed to the employer paying for all the education, whilst now that is no longer the case. So we are seeing a lot of employees starting to go in, where can I get scholarships, where can I get bursaries outside of my employer to make sure that from an educational perspective, as well as from a technical competence perspective, I'm front of line without relying on my employer and burdening him with that cost.
Vumile, one more question for you, and we need to touch on this. A supportive work environment for, I guess, the purpose of mental health during, trying financial times. How important is that for employers to provide that?
It's critical. We've seen fatigue for the year end. I actually was talking about that this morning on SAFM, and that's because we were not a work-life balance. We're seeing mental health from a support and resources perspective not being necessarily where it could be with South Africa currently. We're seeing the World Health Organization study mentioning earlier that mental health services in South Africa are now starting to become more and more important, and we know that this is incredibly important to ensure that we are able to have a productive workforce. But I definitely think we could be doing more around that training development. We have employee engagement initiatives as well as employee wellness programs that can support our employees during these tough economic times.
Very important conversation, very important stuff. Vumile Msweli, CEO, Hesed Consulting, thank you so much for joining us from Johannesburg. And we'll get back to South Africa later when we get that rate decision from the South Africa Reserve Bank.